Nukitashi, otherwise known as Nukie Mitai ni Shima ni Sunderu Watashi wa Dousura ii desu ka, is a title I'm hesitant to talk about because it roughly translates to what should I, who has a flat chest, do when I live on an island that's like an extreme sex game. No, that's literally the title. However, despite its insane title and crazy premise, beneath all that is an excellent story about friendship, morality, and just making you laugh. It's the first visual novel by Qruppo and a title I skipped over in my second room tour because I genuinely have no idea how to describe it. However, it's getting an anime adaptation, so just before the normies get hit with a tactical nuke of peak ecchi action comedy, I just wanted to talk about Nukitashi and why it's getting an anime. Because anime adaptations of visual novels are very rare, so why Nukitashi? Nukitashi is about Junosuke Tachibana and his lesbian little sister who return to Seiran Island, an island where lewd acts are mandated by law because of the declining population. As a proud virgin who doesn't believe in sex without love, he creates the organization NLNS, aka No Love No Sex, and fights to destroy the perverted law using weaponized sex toys. Yeah, that's the super abridged version, but also what literally happens in the story. Made by Qruppo, a relatively new company, they've made some incredibly impressive waves in the Eroge space. Nukitashi released in 2018 and went on to win that year's Moege Scenario Award and the Moege New Brand Award. It was also ranked 4th in Getchu's overall Bishoujo Game Awards, aka the Beautiful Girl Game Awards for visual novels. A respectable feat for a completely new company and title nobody had ever heard about. Its spin-off sequel, Nukitashi 2, released just a year later in 2019. It ditched all the heroines you've come to love, put you in a parallel universe where everything you went through in the first game barely mattered, just so you could romance the villains of the original game. Nukitashi 2 was the grand prize winner of both the 2019 Moe Game Awards and Getchu's overall Bishoujo Game Awards, beating out Sakura Moyu as the Knight's Reincarnation, one of the few visual novels in recent years widely considered a kamige, or godly game. And then there's their third title, Hentai Prison. Yes, that's the damn title, and surprisingly, I genuinely consider it one of my top 5 favorite games of all time, and agree that Hentai Prison is probably a kamige. But it also went on to win that year's grand prize in both the 2022 Moe Game Awards and Getchu's Bishoujo Game Awards. So yeah, Qruppo has kind of made a name for themselves since their launch. And did I mention they have 150,000 subscribers on YouTube, and the second opening of Nukitashi 2 has 6 million views? Yeah, people love their shit, but to the average weeb, this probably doesn't mean anything. They won some niche awards and have a silver play button. What's so special about Nukitashi? Nukitashi is simply put just a very well made game. They took a crazy setting and crazy cast and just wrote a good story backed up by good art, music, and sound effects, and a damn great climax. One where you can lean forward in your chair as everything you've read comes together in a satisfying fiery hot explosion. Something that'll put a smile on anyone's face. I think the writer's comments in the 2018 Moe Game Awards do a very good job at explaining why it's so special. With a long synopsis-like title, similar to recent light novels, it loudly exclaims, "This is a masturbation game." The story comically depicts the protagonist struggling with the pervert ordinance law which mandates lewd acts on the island. However, halfway through, the game transforms into a battle story against the school's enforcement organization and the Yakuza. The story is like a hot-blooded shonen manga where the protagonist fights to protect his and his friends' chastities using homemade battle gadgets disguised as lewd toys. The main character's inner conflicts as he builds trust with his friends, and the scene where he entrusts his future to those friends as he heads to his death are very well depicted. At the same time, the story deals with current issues such as depopulation, LGBT, and the oppression of minorities, elevating the story to something more than just a battle comedy. Truly a thrilling piece of entertainment for any adults with the soul of a boy. Despite its crazy title and insane premise, Nukitashi is simply just fun. It's not trying to be a grand story that parades around a moral message. It's simply here to give you your money's worth, a good laugh and a good time. And beneath all that is where the heavy underlying themes are, dealing with peer pressure, brainwashing, LGBT, the population crisis, and most importantly, moral superiority. Rather than works that tiptoe around sex, poking and prodding at it with a stick, Nukitashi's setting embraces it in a positive, upbeat, comedic manner and simply moves on to building a cast that you can laugh with and cheer for as the plot moves forward. Great stories aren't just about what happens, but who it happens to, and Nukitashi and Qruppo's works really build the character chemistry that lives up to those words. If you asked me a year ago if there'd be any visual novel company would have their works adapted into an anime, Qruppo's name would be at the top of my list, but I am a bit surprised that it's Nukitashi and not Hentai Prison. That being said, unlike Nukitashi, I would genuinely consider Hentai Prison a kamige, godly game, and there's no shot they're adapting Henpri in 11 episodes. Yeah, this anime is going to be 11 episodes long, so let's talk about the Nukitashi anime adaptation. Adapted by Studio Passion, the studio behind the infamous Ishizoku Reviewers and the super infamous PV for Seitokai ni mo Ana wo Aru, which blew up all over shorts and Twitter. Kadokawa, the producer, has also been testing the waters a lot recently, producing works such as Maho Ako, gushing over magical girls, another pretty famous title for its ecchi scenes. They've also made a line of cast-off figures for Maho Ako, and for those of you who don't know what cast-off is, they're pretty much figures where you can take off the clothes. And they've already made a cast-off figure and a body pillow cover for the Nukitashi Blu-ray box. Okay, so we know the company's making it, who's actually in charge of creating this anime, and is it going to be any good? The director is Nagayama Nobuyushi. You probably don't know him, but a lot of you will recognize this. Yes, he directed the storyboard for the infamous ReZero episode 18. Aside from that, there isn't much to discuss. He's directed several average seasonal shows, the biggest standouts being Happy Sugar Life and Smile Down the Runway. I don't think he'll make or break the show, just a standard pick for director. More importantly, in charge of the series composition and script for turning this 40-hour behemoth into an 11-episode anime is Ihara Kenta. He did the script and series comp for series like Yojo Senki, Isekai Ojisan, and Sekimichi Moonlight Fantasy, as well as a bunch of average and below average seasonals, but also a good part of Vinland Saga. Qruppo scenario writers Kamichika Yu and Kurahane Naoto are supervising the script, but in my opinion, this is going to be an uphill battle. Unlike adapting a light novel or manga, you really need to strip down a lot of content to fit a visual novel into an anime. It's 40 hours long and they're fitting it into roughly 4 hours of runtime. That's cutting 90% of the story away. Even with Yu and Naoto's ability to write an engaging scenario, it's a gamble whether they'll translate into script revision for an anime. However, the true atlas of this production is the character designer and most likely chief animation director Kumata. Aside from Qruppo's staff, Kumata is probably the one person I'd put the most faith in when it comes to making this anime. Kumata has been making fan art, doujinshi, and fan animation for Nukitashi way before the anime was decided, 5 years to be precise, for Susuko of Nukitashi 2, who cheekily appears in the second PV for the anime. And he's not just passionate. I consider Kumata a pretty good animator, and here are some of his works to prove it. Having worked on series like Onimai and Slime, Kumata does an incredibly good job at conveying emotions and stories through movement. Here's a random background character from Slime. He literally could have just animated the arm and called it done, but this background goblin is bouncing up and down. He even comments that the production team asked him why he made the goblin move so much. This was not the director or chief animation director telling him what to make. This was Kumata understanding the idea behind a scene and making the vision even better. And that is what I believe an anime adaptation of an original work should be. You add art, music, and animations to a story that already exists. There should be no reason for it to be any worse than the original. All the elements are there to create something even better. Kumata is someone that understands this. Now, whether or not Kumata is the chief animation director, there's only so much he can do alone. Anime is not a one-man job and wouldn't put a lot of stock in studio passion. The music will be done by the original composers of the VN, possibly with new original tracks. The new opening, Utopia or Dystopia, already sounding like an absolute banger from a short segment in the PV. But rather than the songs themselves, it's really more about how they're used by the anime staff. If you want an example of this going terribly wrong, cue all the Twitter death threats to the episode director of AOT Season 4, because for some reason, they decided not to use most of Hiroyuki Sawano's famous tracks. By the way, please don't do that. When you tell someone they did a bad job, make sure to do it respectfully and constructively. If I have any misgivings about this anime, it's that it's 11 episodes long and the Blu-ray release is already confirmed for November and December later this year. Production is most likely already done, and I'm not sure how many changes or revisions the Blu-ray will have, but I wouldn't expect a lot. On the upside, there was a pre-screening event for episodes 1 through 3 last month, and the reception was strong, with a lot of comments praising the comedy, the animation, and questioning if the content could even be shown on TV, many claiming they're looking forward to the anime. The PV also looks great with clean animation and very few stills, and it seems like different services will have different levels of censorship, but rather than removing the content, they'll be covering the screen. While it may not be for everyone with its absurd humor and thin plot, I have faith that it can be a fun ride. Anime adaptations of visual novels are rare, way more niche than manga or light novels, and way harder to adapt, with dozens of hours of branching storylines, and none challenge conventions quite like Nukitashi. So whether it wants to or not, Nukitashi will play a big role for the future of VN adaptations. So with that in mind, I wish this adaptation all the best.